you can either be broken open by hardness or broken. And when you're broken, you make yourself invulnerable. You protect yourself from hardship. But when you're broken open, you make yourself more vulnerable, even in the place of hardship.
Turning a hardship into a growing experience. I wonder, David, if you could talk directly to that person who's right now listening and finds themselves in a hardship and is not quite sure how to find the genuine growth in it. It feels a little forced, something like that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell a story I tell in the book, what I learned about having that kind of conversation. My oldest friend in the world is a guy named Peter Marks. And Pete had suffered from depression only at age 54 or so. As far as I know, he did not suffer it before. But when it came hard for him. And I made the mistake that I think I've now learned are common when talking to people going through a hard time or suffering from depression. The first mistake I made was I tried to tell him how to make the depression lift. I would say, he was an eye surgeon. And I would say, you should go on a mission trip where you give free surgery so people in Vietnam can see. You find that so rewarding when you do that. And I realized later that if you're trying to give a depressed person ideas on how to make depression lift, all you're showing is you just don't get it. Because it's not ideas, though. They know the ideas. They're lacking desire, energy, a lot of other things. Second, I made the mistake of trying to remind him of how wonderful parts of his life were. The kid loved his career, great marriage, his boys are amazing. And I was only reminding him that he was not enjoying the things that are palpably enjoyable. So that was a mistake. And I think I gradually learned first that for those of us who've been fortunate enough never to experience depression, we can't understand it by extrapolating from our own moments of sadness. Another friend of mine named Michael Gerson, who suffered from it, said that depression is a malfunction in the instrument you use to perceive reality. And so in the case of my friend Peter, he had these obsessive voices in his head telling him, you're worthless, no one would miss you if you're gone. And I think what I should have done, and the way we should have talked about this, is first acknowledge the reality of the situation. This sucks. Tell me how it sucks. I think a lot of people feel isolated in their pain. They can't quite express what it feels to them. And often when you run into somebody who's going through hardship, there are like two of them. There's the person experiencing the pain, and then another version of themselves is watching the person experience the pain and trying to figure it all out. And so just like accept reality. Second thing I've been told by a pastor to say is, I want more for you. I want more for you. And those words won't do anything. In fact, there are not many words that will do anything, but just an affirmation of my expression of goodwill toward you. Third, constant touches. I should have sent him a text every day because I think he was worried that his friends would leave him because he wasn't much fun to be around. But a text every day says, I'm not going anywhere. And I read about a guy who his brother was going through a hardship and he was traveling and he sent him a postcard every day. Just a postcard every day. I'm thinking of you. Then I'm reminded of the words Viktor Frankl wrote in Man's Search for Meaning. He was a psychiatrist in the prison Nazi concentration camps. And when people would come to him with suicidal thoughts, he would say, life has not stopped expecting things of you. And that sounds harsh to my ears, but I trust Viktor Frankl knows what he's talking about. And then, the final thing I'd say is that, and I think about this personally, and I think about this for our country, frankly, that people move forward through a process of rupture and repair. Then I ask people, what made you who you are? Nobody ever said, well, I went to vacation in Hawaii. It was fantastic. That made me the person I am today. It's always some moment of hardship, a moment in the valley, and rupture and repair. And the thing I learned about being in the valley is that it's really hard to get yourself out of the valley, that somebody has to reach down and help you out. And I'll tell a story from my own life. I went through a hard time in this period of 12 or 15 years ago, and I was getting divorced, and my kids were leaving home to go off to college, or preparing to. And I was living in a crappy little apartment and doing what any male idiot would do, was trying to solve spiritual and emotional problems through workaholism, just work. And I was accepting dinners. Any invitations I got, I was accepting because I was really lonely. And I got invited over to a house by a couple named Kathy and David. And Kathy and David had a son in the DC public schools who had a friend named James whose mom had some issues, health and otherwise. And she couldn't always feed her son, James. And she couldn't always house him. And so they said, well, James can stay over when he needs to and eat with us. And James had a friend, and that kid had a friend, and that kid had a friend. And by the time we went over there, one Thursday night in 2014 or 2015, there were 40 kids around the dinner table, and there were mattresses all over the house for kids to sleep. And I walk in the door, and first time there, and there's a young man. We call them kids, but they were like 17. And I reach out to shake his hand, and he says, we really don't shake hands here. We hug here. And I'm not the huggiest guy in the face of the earth, but I started hugging. And I went to that house for dinner every Thursday night for the next 7 years. And we did that. We did holidays together. We did Christmas. We did vacations together. And it was a chosen family with about 8 adults, I guess, and then 40 what we would call really teenagers, late teenagers. And it was a chosen family. And what that whole community did was they demanded emotional openness. They beamed love at you, and you really were inspired and had to, and almost impelled to beam it back. And so that community, which lasted until COVID, and still we obviously stay in touch, really was the healing. That was the repair. And so it is that process of rupture and repair that we go through, I think, periodically in our lives. And there's really no escape from them. And some people, as I say, become stagnant, and some people endure it and grow.
In terms of your own growth to this type of emotional availability, what were the actions or commitments that you made as part of that process?
I guess, one, it was just a commitment to, like, not be the person I used to be. Like, I was the kind of person nobody would confide in. I was a person who always had a clock in his head. This is something I still struggle with. Like, when I go to the gas station, I think, I've got 90 seconds pumping gas. I get 2 emails done. That productivity clock is like that's a killer of relationships. Because if you're sitting with someone and you're thinking, I've got to go off to the next meeting or whatever, you're not really present. And so it was just like looking at myself and being dissatisfied with myself. And so what did I do? I wrote a book about emotion called The Social Animal. And it was like, I'm going to write myself into being a better person. And that, I don't know if it's better, but writing is my process of self-expansion, of expanding the circle. So I wrote a book about emotion. I think I just become, you're working out your stuff in public when you're a writer. And my other favorite thing about writing is writers are beggars who tell other beggars where they found bread. And so if I find something in a book that's helpful to me, it gives me great pleasure to put it in one of my books and share it, pass it along. So I think the act of writing, and then, frankly, after the divorce, the act of dating was an emotional education for sure. And then falling in love again and getting married. And those are all acts of expansion of the heart. And I think what it made me realize, a belief, a conviction that was latent within me. I'd been raised by academics, and I'm a pretty heady person. But I do believe the heart is more important than the brain. And that our sentiments are really the most trustworthy thing about us. Back in the 17th century, there were these vicious wars of religion. And Catholics and Protestants were killing each other in great number. And in the 18th century, people said, stop. We've got to stop this. And so there were 2 branches of the Enlightenment. One branch, which was French, said reason or emotion and religious fervor are murderous. They're killing people. So we have to create a cult of reason, and that our reasoning brain is really the dignity of human being. And they literally had a cult of reason in the French Revolution. But there was another Enlightenment, which centered in Scotland. And they said, we really don't think reason is that powerful. Reason is weak. One of the Scottish philosophers, David Hume, said, reason is and ought to be the slave to the passions. And he meant by that your emotions are sensitive. Your emotions are wise most of the time, if they're well educated. And so you can learn to trust your emotions. And I do believe the heart is really the driver of our lives. Reason, the heart tells us where to go, what we want, and how passionately we'll go, how fast we'll go. The emotions, and reason is just there to help plot the course. So it is slave to the emotions. And so the process of educating your emotions through literature, through art, through ritual, through painting, that is the key educational act of life, not the stuff that goes on in a schoolroom with a teacher lecturing to students. And it's that emotional education, that's the one we conduct in our adulthood and really through our adulthood, if we're going to grow and become deeper people as we go along.
Discover on-demand videos and docuseries, explore a full schedule of daily life classes, and become part of an incredible community. At Sounds True One, we invite you inward to find your way, your way.